And in a Chinese orphanage at that time, when you turn 14, you're on your own. You're on the streets, you're fending for yourself. One of the orphanages, just watching this little boy like play on a swing. Like I kept telling my mom, I wish we could like adopt him too.
Yeah. Gorsha Jolly.
Yes.
Welcome to the Freedom Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
And I wanted to talk to you because you were adopted. Mm-hmm. And you have siblings that were adopted.
Yes.
And I feel like when I've listened to podcasts or I've talked to people, I usually hear from the parents' point of view of like how hard it was to adopt and what their experience was raising a kid that was adopted. But I want to talk to someone who was adopted and has siblings who were and what that experience was like.
Right.
So how many siblings do you have? Where are you in birth order? Are all of them adopted? Like that kind of thing.
Right. So yes, all of my siblings are adopted. There's 6 others other than me. So 7 kids total. Birth order changed like as we adopted more. So I was the youngest for a long time, and then I was the second youngest, and now I kind of fall right in the middle.
Okay.
So I have 2 older sisters and an older brother and 3 younger brothers.
And were all of you adopted like oldest to youngest? No.
So my biological brother, Victor, and I, we were adopted, but he is my biological brother. We came to the United States first. I was 16 months old. He was 2.5. And then a year or so later, they went back and got my 2 sisters, Yara and Christina. They were 4.5, almost 5.
Okay.
And they came to the States. So now we have 3 that are the same age, and then I'm the youngest at this point. And then back in like 2010, we went and got my little brother, Dima. And he was just a baby. And so then he was the youngest once he came home. And then like 8, 9, 10 years ago, something like that, we got 2 from China. One of them was little brother for Dima to play with. And the other one was young man about my age. And so now I fall right in the middle.
So the last one that was adopted, how old was he when he was brought to the States?
So the younger one was maybe like 2.
Okay.
And then the older one was 13, almost 14.
Wow.
And in a Chinese orphanage at that time, when you turn 14, you're on your own. You're on the streets, you're fending for yourself. So my brother Joseph from China, we got him like literally a month before he turned 14. So he was literally snatched out. And that's why we named him Joseph, because he was in captivity for 13 years.
Wow, that's so cool.
And if my Bible history, I believe that's between 13 and 14 years is the time that Joseph in the Bible was in captivity.
Yeah.
So that's why we named him that, because the Lord saved him like right at the last moment. So
that's amazing.
It's really cool.
So it's really rare that boys are adopted from China unless they have some sort of physical ailment or disability.
Right.
Was that your brother's case?
It was on paper. We were looking at getting 2 special needs children from China. An older one, for sure. That was something that the Lord had planted a seed 20 years ago in their hearts. And so to see that come to fruition so many years later was really cool. But they were both technically special needs children. The younger one was supposed to have history of seizures and just different medical issues. But once we got them home, there was nothing. Like they seemed completely normal, completely fine, never had any kind of medical emergencies or, lots of doctor's visits to diagnose problems. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, but the heart was to find some kids that were special needs and be able to provide them a place. Cause like you said, they are even more overlooked than any other, kind of adopted child.
Yeah.
They were.
Wow. And where are you and the older siblings from?
Yeah, so there are 5 of us from Russia and then 2 from China, like I was talking about. And we're all from Far East Russia.
Okay.
So when you get to Moscow or Moscow, I'm Russian. I don't even know how to say it correctly. But we'll just say, we'll 50-50. We'll say once you get to Moscow, you're about halfway there.
Okay.
So it's another like 8-hour plane ride to where we're from.
Whoa.
So it's far, far East Russian. So I am Asian. A lot of people don't like that. I'm like, I see you want to be offended, like, in this time. But so I am Asian. because Russia's that big.
Yeah,
so
huge.
we're all the way over on the Asia side in the little like boot that kind of comes down and kicks China, that little land shape there. So we were actually born closer to the border of China than anything.
Wow.
So way on down there.
Have you gone back?
We did. We went back to get our sisters because Russia's a 2-trip process.
Oh.
Now adoption is closed in Russia, which is really sad.
Yeah.
And it's something that, I hope will open back up eventually. But it's a 2-trip process. So we went back, my brother and I went back with our parents on their second trip to get our sisters. And then we got to go back to our home orphanage and meet the ladies who had taken care of us. We were probably 9, 10 at the time. So it's been a while, so it's been 8 or 9 years since we've seen them. We were able to play our music for them because when we came to the States, we started taking music lessons and playing together, and there was something that was kind of growing there. And so we were able to go back and play our music for them and give them things for the orphanage. And just that full circle moment was really, really incredible for them too, because they worked so hard. It was not a nice orphanage, but it was very well run, and the ladies there really cared about the kids.
Wow.
And so for them to see that, I think was just such an encouragement and just such a beautiful moment to be able to do that.
Did you have memories of the orphanage?
I didn't. I was 16 months old, so I didn't really remember anything. I like to think I did, but really it's just watching home movies, and you just kind of trick yourself into thinking you remembered it, but really you're watching home movies when you're 4, and that's what you remember.
Yeah.
Or the videotapes of when we were adopted. Like what happens is basically before the internet, the adoption agency takes a VHS of different kids in the orphanage, just them playing or walking around or, and they'll send it to different adopted couples. And so it just passes from one person to another until someone picks the kid. So we still had some of those VHSs. We had a lot of the home video that our mom and dad made when they took a little camcorder over there. Tape. Anybody remember tape? Tape camcorder over there. So I have memories of like that, but nothing from the orphanage.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like to go back emotionally for you?
I mean, I was like 9 years old, so it was fun. I mean, emotionally, I think the only thing that was really sobering was being back in one of the orphanages and just watching this little boy like play on a swing and just being like, oh man, I kept telling my mom, I wish we could like adopt him too, but everything else was really, it wasn't even surreal. It's just like you're experiencing new things for the first time. You're on an adventure, and this is really the first time that you're experiencing this, even though you grew up there, you have no memory, like we were saying. So you're just experiencing new things for the first time. If you've ever been to, out of the country, or you're just going to a new place, you're just taking it in for the first time.
Yeah.
You don't really have that parallel, like emotional attachment. It is sad though. But I don't know how like emotionally connected you are at 9 years old to understand that, at least with that situation. But it is definitely very moving looking back on it, and hearing our mom and dad talk about just seeing the terrible conditions that the kids are in.
So you're saying, watching that kid on the swing, you wish you could adopt that kid too.
Right.
Did you ever have a hard time when your younger siblings were starting to get adopted, or like your sisters, with having to share your parents?
I've honestly never thought of that. I don't think so. No, it was just like we were just really excited to have like another person in our lives, and I love my sisters. They're amazing. And so it was just, it was like, you're making new friends. Like there's new friends and they're sleeping over indefinitely. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was great. We got to teach them and take care of them. And then that kind of turned into, beating up on them later on. But, that's just all in fun and play, brothers and sisters stuff. But no, it just felt like, someone's coming for a sleepover. We're like bringing these people home, because we did have an understanding of like what that meant and the gravity and the excitement that comes with welcoming a new member of a family. Yeah. And so never thought about it like having to share mom and dad. But that's an interesting question.
Do you and your biological brother, you said Victor is his name, do you have a different relationship because you're biological siblings than with other siblings?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We were really close because, we like shared the same room. We did everything together. We had similar interests. We were building tree houses together, and my sisters too. Like, we'd do that all together, or we'd split up in pairs, and, but so we are definitely closer, but I don't know that it's necessarily because we're like blood related.
Yeah.
There may be something to the whole like, oh, blood bonds you, but like, that gets really like mystical, spiritual. I don't know. I don't think so. I would be inclined to think that we're just close because we were in close proximity and familially close.
Yeah. Was it difficult for your parents to have that many kids, like adopted or not, just 7 children?
Yeah, 7 kids is a challenge, but something that I've learned and I try to explain to people about big families is that okay, I'll say this. Big families, because of the age gap, like the mom at some point is not taking care of 7 children. Right. She's taking care of her youngest and managing the rest, and they're each helping take care of their younger siblings. Right? They're babysitting. At some point, the teenagers are changing diapers. Yeah. Like you do it to where it's manageable. Now, our family was different because we had 3 the same age, and then me for the longest time. So it's kind of like you're homeschooling, everybody's in the same grade, you're doing everything at once, so you kind of got like one shot. Like if it's not like
3
you can,
guinea pigs, not
and
one.
Because I came to the States younger, I think I had a little bit of advantage developmentally because there's less trauma, there's less setback when you're neglected from such a young age. And so it was basically like we were all learning the same thing. I was 3 going on 30 in my mind. And so we were all in the same grade. We're all learning the same topics in school and being taught the same thing. So it really was like we're doing this and we're going to see how it goes. People will joke with other families. It's like, well, if you mess up your first, you have your second, you can always like, make changes and learn and grow from how you raise each kid. And of course, where they fall in order is going to change that as well. So there's a lot to it, but yeah, it's, that's how it went. And I forgot the question, but
your mom homeschooled all 7 of you?
Yes, but it wasn't all 7 at once. It was 4 of us for a long time. Okay. So we were probably 9 or 10. And then we had a baby in the house. Yeah. So he didn't talk till he was 3. So there was just, he was still way behind as far as even like schooling goes, you know. And
your 13-year-old brother, you were how old when he was adopted?
When Joseph was adopted, I would have been 13 as well. Okay. Or I would have been 14 or 15.
Did he speak English at all?
No.
What was that like?
English. That was very challenging. He had no knowledge of anything. Like, didn't know what Christmas was, didn't know what Jesus was, and it's not to his belittlement, but, for the longest time, he thought that the sun was a light that was hung in the sky. Wow. Like that to show like that's the kind of disconnect that he had from like reality because he was isolated and, grew up without much of an education, just didn't understand how the world worked. So you have that plus a language barrier. Yeah. And so there was a lot of translating apps, and a lot of, signs and, just dealing with that was challenging, but it wasn't something that was impossible. Yeah. Because he began to learn more and, it became to where now he speaks fluent English for the most part.
With Joseph, coming from a Christian family, was it more important to your parents right off the bat to teach him about Jesus or to teach him about like math? Like where was the priorities list on like, let's get him to like where a typical 13-year-old kid would be versus maybe it's more important to just teach him about the Bible?
Well, we taught the Bible and English together.
Interesting. Okay.
So, it wasn't like structured even as good as that sounds. It was just as he learned more, we would always have family devotionals, so he's sitting there with a Bible, and we got him a Chinese American Bible too. And he would be able to follow along in Chinese, and he didn't even really know a lot of the Chinese language, but he was able to follow along in Chinese, and then get to where he could sound out, like when we would all read a passage, he was able to sound out that, and he didn't always understand it, but there was other times when we were able to explain that. So he's learning his English. He's doing like Rosetta Stone or some program like that.
Duolingo.
Yeah, something like that. Duolingo or So he was doing Rosetta Stone but also learning the Bible in English and math all at the same time. So he just really jumped into everything, and he had to start at a very basic level, and just grow from there. So, he was nowhere near where a 13-year-old was for a long time. Like he started I wasn't public schooled, so I don't know what they teach in each grade, but he was probably like 6th, 7th grade or less going, starting. Because that's where you have to start when you know nothing. So,
have you ever talked to him about whether it was hard to have a kid in the family that was the same age and farther along? Like, did he ever compare himself to you?
He might have. We never really discussed that. I would say he didn't really have he knew I was farther along, but I don't even know if he had a frame of reference of how much. So he just knew that I was doing the music thing and I was doing my thing, and I was like out of school, or I was finishing school. And so I don't know I'm sure he did, but he was really just learning everything new for the first time. So I think he kind of had the work mindset where he's just like, I'm just jumping in here. And kind of oblivious to kind of everything else, which is actually kind of beautiful when you can just jump in and do that and not think about it. But that's a good question. I'll have to. We never really discussed it. But
at this point, is everyone an adult?
Everyone should be an adult. Does everyone act like an adult? Different question. Is everyone an adult? Yes. Are we talking like 18?
18.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone's an adult except for my 2 younger brothers.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So mid-20s, early 20s, and then we have 2 teenagers.
Okay.
Gosh,
gotcha.
That's hard to believe.
So are there still a lot of kids at home?
Just 2.
Just the 2?
Just the 2 at home.
Okay.
Yes.
Was it ever challenging either having that many siblings, or if adoption played into it specifically, but for you to be a middle child with that many kids around? Or let me ask a better question.
Okay.
I think older kids and middle child kids can often feel emotionally dropped because other children require more energy out of the parents or other siblings. And then when you have a sibling who's being taught everything for the first time, who's the same age as you, did that ever, come into play where you felt emotionally dropped by parents or siblings?
I don't think so at all. No, speaking for myself, I was always very independent as far as like my learning and everything. So at some point, at least with homeschool, it gets to where you're not, your parents aren't teaching you as much. I mean, you still go to them for advice and all of that, but they're not teaching you. You're really learning how to learn, if that makes sense. You're going and you're seeking knowledge, and you're doing your hobbies, and you're just learning, and you're absorbing information, and you also have your curriculum and the things that you have to do there, the responsibilities. But really, the hands of the parent come off in a big way as far as the responsibility of teaching.
Yeah.
As far as like, sitting down and like being there 24/7, like you have to do when someone's starting out. So I was always just very driven in learning that way, and understood that Joseph is going to need a lot of attention, and he's going to need a lot of help. But I was okay with that. Like I wanted that for him. And I was able to, when you do become more independent on your learning, it frees up your parents to be able to, give that kind of attention where he needs it.
Right. So for me, I grew up homeschooled, and all my siblings are. I'm the oldest of 4, so not as many as 7. Sure. But for me, I was super independent, and the teaching stuff never bothered me that my siblings needed more help than I did. But for me, I would get frustrated when it would be like the schooling hours were done. It was, family time. And I would go and try and talk to my mom and always get interrupted by another kid and our conversations get cut short.
Right.
Or she would completely forget that she was even talking to me because someone else needed her.
Right.
And that was more where it was difficult for me. And I felt like I didn't have space to be able to talk to my parents. Was that something that you also felt?
I mean, that I think that's on a very individual level as far as personality in person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I see some people handle this really well. It's something that I want to be better at. Like if someone comes into a conversation, if it's very urgent and I need to attend to the person who's just come up, what often we do is just, we kind of go with them. And no, we don't mean to hurt the person we're talking to, but they do feel like, well, what just happened? So just even being conscious about, hey, I really want to hear what you have to say. Let me take care of this 1 minute goes a long way.
Yeah.
So all of that to say, it does, and it depends on kind of the person, the individual that is handling the situation, the mother in this case. And I can't even put a lot of blame on them because a lot of them are doing this for the first time.
Right. That's
the moms
thing.
are doing it for the first time. So yes, is it hard? Can it be frustrating for the child? Yes. But also I have to extend some mercy to them because they are managing a lot.
Yeah.
And it's hard to remember to shut down one conversation. And as you get older, there has to be even an unknown or an unheard understanding between the older child and the mother that, hey, I get it. You have things to do. I'm not going to take that super personal.
Right.
I mean, to answer the question, that happened. It always happened. It's not uncommon, and I understand it. And I think that's going to happen kind of no matter where you are in the workplace, whether you're homeschooled. But I don't think it was like emotionally damaging to me. I mean, I do like to have the attention that I need, but that's where just being very intentional with your children and taking the time with each of them. I've seen some parents do that. This is the day I have with this one, or we're doing an afternoon here, or hop in the truck with daddy, we're going to go here. And just spending that time to where you can talk to them, especially when there's that many kids, I think is something that I want to prioritize. And again, it's just like, you're kind of doing this for the first time. So as far as a parent and our parents, so just learning from that and being able to adjust and go, oh, how can I switch this up? Little things that will make each child seen and heard and feel valued, even though they do, even though you love them so much, but just helping reinforce that.
Yeah. It's an interesting revelation when you get to that age where you're like, my parents are people. Like they're doing this for the first time and they can only do so much.
Right.
Like there's so much grace that comes when you're able to recognize that.
Right.
Because before that, you kind of just victimize yourself where you're like, no, my parents are here to serve me.
Right.
But then, I mean, it's a maturity thing that you just get to a certain age and you're like, yeah, they are doing this for the first time. That's crazy.
Right.
When did you become a Christian? How old were you when you made it your own?
It's been so long ago, but it's kind of been in stages.
Okay.
So I gave my life to the Lord maybe at 6 or 7. And I was no like theologian, but I did have a deep understanding of like I'll say this. The way we went to church is we went to a small non-denominational church, and we always sat in the sermon with her mom and dad.
Okay.
They just thought, there's going to be, the Bible says the word of God, when it goes out, it will not return void. So it seems like they wanted us to be in there because even if we were listening or not, we were absorbing something. And we became more and more interested as we got older, started maturing. So they kind of kept us out of Sunday school for once we turned a certain age, most of us probably 6 or 7, we were sitting in the sermon with them, just because they wanted to have that hands-on thing and be able to talk about, really deep things with us as much as they could. So I did have an understanding of salvation and, and all of that. And my mom remembers it better than I do, but I just came to a realization that I'm a sinner and that I need him, and I was just crying and just said, I want to give my life to the Lord and be baptized. And it comes back to the whole thing that I've been studying in Mark. Blessed are those who mourn. And it's not just someone sad. It's this mourning over your sins.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that was that place. And then as I got older, you know, I still carried that with me. It was, I mean, I'd like to say I was one of the kids who was on fire at 13, you know, just like, you know, we all know those kids, and that's great because they're growing places, and it's so important to have that from a young age. I can't say that for myself. I still love the Lord. We went to church, but we got music going on. We got other things, but it was always, we were so surrounded by so many people who love the Lord that it was always prevalent in our lives and always on the forefront of our minds.
One thing that I've noticed with a lot of friends I've had that were adopted, even at very, very young ages, like all of the people that I grew up with intimately that were adopted under 2 years old. And yet there still seems to be a very prevalent spirit of anxiety and fear of abandonment in all of them. And it's something that I've talked with, like, I have clients who have adopted kids, and they're like, yeah, it's in every single one. Was that something that you have experienced personally, or anything that you've noticed in your siblings?
We definitely had abandonment issues when we first came home. Like, we couldn't leave our mom's side. If she was like, I'm going to the car, just like get the groceries out of the car, like we would flip. Like we could not handle that. And same for my little brother, Dima. Like he was just glued to my mom's hip, you know? Yeah. As we got older, I mean, I haven't seen that manifested in any of my siblings in that regard. I mean, everybody's going to have a little bit of anxiety here and there. I don't know. I don't think anything about the abandonment issue. I don't know how that would present itself practically.
Do you ever feel it in your relationship with God?
I don't, yeah, but like I guess what I'm trying to think of, what would like,
I fear that that God won't always be there, or that if you mess up too bad, he'd leave.
Yes. Not as much for me, but I've seen that. I've seen that in my siblings for sure. And I've probably been through that myself.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, it was never like an issue. I think it's kind of just natural. You know, it might be more prevalent with one sibling or another, but I think that's kind of something that everybody walks through at some point, you know? And it usually comes close to salvation, you know? Once you come to the realization that he's not going to abandon you, you know? That seems like a very common thread when people are going to be saved or they're close to salvation, you know, and which is really cool. But I mean, not in my life. Now, like if we really dove deep, like psychologically, and like found like threads between things, like maybe, but like it's not obvious. But abandonment issues for sure when we first came home. At least me and my brother and a few else of us can't English today. But yeah, freaking out if mom left, just going crazy. Food was also another
I've heard that, yeah.
A big thing. Like we would just go crazy. Like, you know, in our high chairs until the food came, and then we'd just eat it all up. And that is something that I have noticed. The only thing that I wonder if is from the orphanage is, for the longest time, and sometimes I still do it, but I will order way more than I can eat. Because I feel like this is my one shot at Chick-fil-A today. Yeah. This is my one shot at food today, or whatever. Yeah. Like, I'm not thinking that, but deep down somewhere, it's like, what if you need an extra chicken nugget and you don't got it? You know? And I think that may stem from the orphanage, but it's not like that as much anymore. Yeah. But there was definitely a time where it just, I don't know, maybe that prompted me to, you know, eat more chicken.
Right. So with your parents, you know, with like fear of abandonment super early on at first, or like hoarding food, or like being scared that you weren't going to get enough food. Right. Did your parents wait a specific amount of time before adding more kids into the family? Like, did they wait until you weren't, you know, panicked every time they walked out the door before they added in a new family member?
Yeah. I mean, this was the first few months.
Oh, so it wasn't a super long time.
No.
Okay.
Like once we had love and affection and safety and kind of got settled in, those things were less. And my mom may be watching this going, it was like 6 months, but it was not a long period of time. I think we went and got our sisters like a year or two later.
Okay.
So by that time, like we were thriving.
Yeah, you were settled.
We were doing well. We still had things, but nothing that would cause another family member coming in to be super tumultuous. You know, it was pretty settled by then. And you know, it just takes time. But yeah, it wasn't like we got home and then like they were back out like 6 months later. Like it was, it's a long process, a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape. So.
Financially, how did your parents manage to do that at many adoptions?
I have no clue.
Really? Have you?
I mean,
have you seen that trend on Instagram where adopted kids go to their parents and they say, "How much did you buy me for?" Have you not seen that?
No. Hey, Jamie, pull up.
I think that's so funny. Or like, did you spend more on me than my sibling?
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
I'm kind of curious. Surprised you've never asked.
No, I mean, I know they mortgaged or they refinanced and I almost said mortgaged the house. No, they refinanced, and I know the first time my mom and dad had been saving up for an SUV. Then been thinking about adoption, and they were just driving down the road one day, and our dad said, dang it, we're going to buy us some kids. We're not getting this SUV, you know? And like people, I know there's people out there just going like, oh, like they're going to write a nasty comment. But like if you are able to think, you know, you're able to know that what he meant was that they were going to, instead of buying an SUV, something that's going to be in the trash heap in 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to buy something that's lasting. And that I think is really treasures in heaven.
Yes.
Even in an earthly state, you know, like just that way of that mindset. And it was Christ that compelled them, you know, ultimately. Good church support group that encouraged them, small, but, you know, really good.
Were your parents able to have kids?
No, they weren't. That's what really prompted them to adopt. I did meet someone recently that could have kids, and they actually prioritized adopted kids because so many people only adopt if they can't have kids.
Right.
So there are some people out there who will kind of flip the script on that, but yeah, it's hard financially.
Yeah.
You know? My dad owned a small business. He owned a bike shop. So he owned that for a while, and then he got into real estate in 2008. Great year.
Yikes.
Great year, guys. He got into real estate in 2008, sold his business because we were thinking about adopting another. And it's just like a small bike store. It was very popular and it was very well known and profitable and all of that. And but he got into real estate and it's been doing that ever since. But yeah, right in 2008 when the market crashed. So it was a tough transition.
Yeah, that's rough.
Real estate definitely provided much better support for a larger family than a small business. But, you know, honestly, the Lord provided in some really amazing ways. And I mean, we've never been in need or want. We did live in the barn, but like that was, you know, we were building a house while we were doing that attached to the barn, but it still was not fun. But the Lord has always provided. We've never gone hungry or anything. So, you know, when he calls someone or when he goes to take someone out of a place and he tells you to go, you go and he'll provide.
Yeah.
You know, it's James 1:5. If you ask and you don't have faith, you're like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind, you know? So that's the other element of it, is having faith and just knowing that if you're faithful and he wants it done, he's going to make a way. Yeah. Because he does not call you to something that you can't do. He might call you to something that you feel like you're not prepared to do or you're not prepared to do, but he's not going to call you to something, start a work, and he's not going to finish it. Right. He might not finish it with you. You know, you think about David and Solomon in the temple, you know, even in that, he started the work in David, but he finished it in Solomon. I mean, Moses didn't even get to go into the promised land. And a finished work is not the same, you know, for what we think about. Right. It's finished when he says it's finished, not when we think it's finished. And so something may feel like a dead end, but it's not without a purpose, you know? So, but yeah, the Lord will provide a way, and he did for us, and it was really cool to see.
So in talking with other Christian, it's usually women that I'm talking to, but
Me too.
yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
You know how it is. I feel like the two biggest things that I hear when talking about adoption is one, well, people will say that they don't want to have kids at all because why would you bring a kid into this world? Which my question is, why would you not save one that's already here? And they're like, it's a lot of work. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you really shouldn't be having kids then.
Right.
And then the other thing that I hear a lot is that because the Bible says to be fruitful and multiply, that means you have to have a biological kid before you adopt. Have you heard that?
No.
I've heard that multiple times recently. And I was like, okay, but what about, that's one verse versus all the other ones that say to take care of the widows and the orphans.
Right. That's pure religion.
Right.
That is pure religion.
That like it doesn't make any sense to me.
Be fruitful and multiply. But he's speaking to
a
Adam and
nation.
Eve. No, I just think that's very, it's just an excuse people are making. And I think people will take and twist biblical text. Say when he means be fruitful and multiply, it's all that comes with that is family. And because like if you don't have an adopted kid, how are your kids going to have kids?
Right. And then what about
or like
Paul?
how is your name going to be passed along? And it's not even about that. It's not about like leaving a legacy or whatever. But like, if you don't have any kids, then you're never going to multiply. You're never going to be fruitful. And
what about Paul saying that singleness is better for the kingdom of the Lord? But then if you find a wife, it's a good thing.
right.
So then is Paul wrong for that then because he didn't multiply? You know, then you get down this whole rabbit hole.
Right.
It's like, well, then that probably isn't what you're saying it means.
Right. I think the Lord means in general. And if the way you do that is by adopting a child and nurturing them and then they have kids.
Right. And they multiply.
Or maybe they adopt. Who knows?
Right.
Like even for myself, I'm like, I want to have my own kids, but it's like also like I have a heart for adoption. So I'm like, you know, torn between that too. Not torn, but just something I'm considering, you know, because I do know the need. And it's like when you know the need, you almost feels like you have a responsibility in a certain sense to be able to, or to consider that.
Yeah,
or
at least pray about it.
Support other people who are doing it.
Exactly.
Actively.
Right.
You know, but yeah, I think that's just, you have to read the Bible. Like, be smart about it. Like, don't, you know what I mean? Like, everything's not as cut and dry as that. People are too literal.
Because you're pulling one verse out of a chapter in a book.
Right. Can you actually, Christian, can you pull that up and read that?
Genesis 1:28, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.
Yep.
Right.
So that's not a command to each individual.
He's commanding Adam and Eve in this story because the world do be empty.
So, you know, whether you have biological kids or you adopt, are there things that you would do differently in parenting adopted children versus biological children?
Adopted children, they need a different kind of care. They are, in a sense, special needs because they have special needs that have to be met. Whether it's the abandonment issues like we were talking about, eating, developmental. Like if you're adopted at 4, neurologically, you're 10, 20 years behind.
Yeah.
You know? And imagine that at 14.
Right.
Like not just like, oh, I'm behind, like I'm in first grade and I should be in 6th grade. It's like, no, like developmentally, mentally, you are so set back.
Yeah.
It was like that for my sisters. You know, it's not as drastic. Like they're very sharp and they're great. They've really come a long way and they're pretty normal now, you know. But they came home at 4 years old and my mom was talking to a neuroscientist, not a scientist, a neurologist, I guess.
Yeah.
Her mom was at the our mom was at the hospital with our grandmother and just struck up a conversation, told him about our kids and my sisters, and she's like, 4.5 years. She's like, they are like 10 to 20 years developmentally behind. Like, she's like, for how they're doing, that's like amazing, you know?
Wow.
And so the Lord does redeem, and his hand works through that. So there's definitely those challenges. We didn't have anything too terribly like drastic, but you know, behavioral things. As far as the difference, I've never like raised a biological kid.
Sure.
So it's hard to tell. I just know that, yeah, adoption can be more difficult. It's like they need more attention. That's why homeschooling was so good. If we go into public school, it would have been a disaster. A disaster.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful that our parents homeschooled us. It gave us the time and the flexibility to be able to cater learning to each child. Like, oh, if you're ahead, you're good. Like, you do this, and then you help your siblings or whatever.
Is there anything else that, you know, for anyone that's watching this that is thinking about adopting, you know, when they want to have kids or is currently in the process, anything that we haven't talked about that you would, you know, advise them?
I would say pray a lot. But,
Yeah.
you know, I think that whether or not, I think that consistency of like that needing him, like relying on him, you know? So I'd say pray a lot, find a good support group around you, whether it's a church with other adopted parents that you can talk to, you know, like an adoption culture at a church, or even just a church that's going to help you financially or pray for you so you don't feel like you're alone. I would say domestic adoption is great as well. You know, in my head, I think foreign adoption mostly, you know, like that's where my head goes.
Sure.
But it's like there's a big need here.
Yeah.
Foster care, all of that. Pray a lot and having a good support group around you. The two things that come to my mind, I think that were really, really beneficial to my parents adopting, especially having a church around them or friends who will pray for you and just help you out when the kids come home, and, you know, friends and family, like having that around was really, really big. You know, even just having people at the airport when you came home, like when we came home, like people from our church and friends and family to just like take the kids, and, you know, like you know, having that there is so important. Like something we'd all want to have, like if we were coming home from a trip or anything, you know. So support, prayer, pray a lot.
Those are huge. Yeah. That's really good. Thank you for everything that you said and for being honest and vulnerable.
Yeah.
I pray that it helps people.
Yeah, I do too.
Do you want me to tag your social media? If people want to see more Gorsha?
Yeah, if you want to.
If you want to see him roping, playing multiple instruments on tour with multiple people.
Yeah.
Gorsha does a lot of things. You see him ride horses.
Yeah.
Then I'll put his Instagram in.
Sounds good.
In the below.
In the belows.
Please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.